Hi,
Hey,
I'm Whitney,
and I'm Dexter.
and we are tied together.
So we're starting a new project today. We're
The oh, sorry.
tied together media reviews where we talk about some of our favorite media, whether it be movies, books, ideas, whatever, and just kind of give you our general thoughts and a brief overview of what it's about and what we took away from it.
And a lot of them are either disability or adoption related, so we thought it would be fun to share with others, followers,
Yeah, absolutely.
etc.
And we definitely want your guys' feedback as well because we don't like to talk in a bubble. So we like to talk these things over for us, but we also like to hear everybody else's input because it always gives us new perspective.
Absolutely. So for this first installment, we have Three Identical Strangers, which is a shockingly true documentary.
It's like a stranger than fiction type thing because you can't make this kind of stuff up.
Right. Do you want to give an overview of it?
So basically, there's three guys who they didn't know each other for like 19, 20 years, and then one of them goes off to college, and he ends up being called the wrong. Long story short, he ends up going to college and finds out he has two other brothers.
They're triplets.
And that they were separated at birth, and they had no idea the other existed for like 20 years. And then like at first it's like the being overwhelmed with the fact that they found each other and the huge media storm that created, and then like it goes even further than that because there's more to dig into about it, about the adoption agency that they were adopted through and the whole process and what the goal was in their adoption, their separation and stuff. And it's just it's like a wild ride.
It really is, and I think it really embodies a lot of feelings with adoption.
Yeah.
I wrote down some quotes from the documentary to kind of like jump off for our discussion.
Yeah.
So at one point, Bobby says when he's talking about finding out he has a brother or has a twin. At that point, he thought he had a twin instead of a triplet. He says, when you're having a dream, sometimes you just want to see what happens next.
Yeah, that's right before he went and met with the other. Because he just like even the way they tell the story, this guy's like, you have a brother that looks just like you, da 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 da, and then he's like, all right, let's go meet him. And
now.
And right after that's when he makes that statement. And honestly, like even that like was kind of how we approached this. I think we kind of were like, or at least for me, I was like, oh, cool. Like at first I thought it was a joke, but once I found out like it was real that we found you, it was like, all right, well let's go, let's jump in with everything we got because like, we're family and you're my sister and this is just how this is gonna be. And I feel like that's kind of what he was saying there. It's like, this seems like so unreal. Let's just see what happens.
Did you ever have a moment where it felt like a dream?
It sounded like a Lifetime movie or something, like just something of that level of like this can't, like 29 years and like she never, like we had no idea what. I honestly initially thought it was a joke. Like I thought our dad was pulling my leg. So yeah, I guess it definitely did feel like a dream.
In the film, he talks about how they drive straight through the night and get to his brother Eddie's house very late at night. And I didn't come to your house extremely late, but I absolutely, hearing those lines, it just took me back to when I was driving to your house late at night. I was by myself. I didn't have a friend with me, but is your eye okay?
Yeah, it's kind of hurting, but we're good.
Are we okay?
Yeah, we're
okay.
Fine.
And just thinking about like just that moment sitting in your driveway realizing that like this dream was about to become real.
Like that your life's never going to be the same after you open the door.
Right. Up to this point it was just like, oh cool, like I've talked to some people on the phone and it didn't seem real.
It was like a step removed.
It definitely seemed like a dream.
And yeah, they talk about that a lot in the movie too, how like once they found each other, their whole lives changed. And I mean, we didn't have some kind of media storm or anything like that, but like our entire lives did change.
Absolutely.
From that day forward.
Yeah, another quote, I think Bobby says this too, we didn't realize from then on how much things were going to change.
And that's absolutely from, meeting each other, talking about our first plans to me ended up moving 1,200 miles to live with you in New Mexico. Like, I still get blown away by the whole thing, the whole process of like how much we've come through and how different I personally am as a person between the first time I met you and now. It seems like another lifetime.
Absolutely, and it's been about 2.5 years that we've known each other.
Something like that,
I think. One thing I was really interested in was how the family dynamics played out with the different brothers. We've had a lot of tumult. We've had a lot of shifts in our family dynamics.
Yeah.
Very painful shifts. And they're kind of mum on that in the film. There's some adopted family members that talk to the camera. Their birth mother does not.
Yeah. She gets mentioned, but she is not on.
Yeah, she's not on screen with them. And for me, it leaves a lot to wonder about.
Yeah.
I wonder a lot about, like how did all those relationships shake out? And if they are all still strong and good, how did they manage that?
Yeah.
What was the same and what was different from our situation? How did they work through the hurt feelings? How did they
and you don't really get a good sense of that from the movie, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the because we did some auxiliary research and stuff. And even in the interviews that we saw, they weren't real clear with where everybody was or how everything shook out there either.
Yeah, especially with their birth mother.
Mm-hmm.
I think anyways, it was like maybe the relationship with the birth mother was different between the triplets.
Yeah, they all made different choices.
Mm-hmm, and wanted different things from it. One thing about the film was that each triplet was in a different socioeconomic status.
Yeah.
Their household, like one twin was the son of a doctor or triplet.
Yeah.
One was in a middle class household. His father was a teacher. And then one was in a kind of lower middle class or lower working class. Some of immigrants. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying that his parents were immigrants and they didn't make the most money. The interesting thing to me, though, like it seemed like his parents were the most accepting of the whole thing. They were the most like open and just like I think can't remember the guy's name, but they called him Bubala.
Yeah, Bubala.
And he's when I think that's David's parents. No, that's not. It's
yeah, I think it is David's father. Yeah, David's father.
And he was like, when he found out, he was just like, I have 2 more sons. And like, the way that the guys described their relationship to him was like, he just took them all, and he was the one that he kind of glued them together.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just interesting to see how the different families reacted differently to those situations. Anyway.
And it reminded me a lot of sometimes it seemed like there was friction between the brothers, having grown up in different households or different ways of, I guess, just like one kind of grew up rich and the other, just growing up differently in that way.
Yeah. And
I don't know if that's caused friction between the two of us.
I don't think it's caused any friction. I think it's caused a difference in perspective in a lot of, and maybe not in a lot of ways, but in some very like distinct ways. I think there's certain things that like you need that I don't necessarily need, and certain things that I need that you don't necessarily need, and I don't know really how to get into that. As like just small things, nothing real big, but definitely some differences.
And I think that would bring us to our next discussion point. We're going to probably do this in 3 parts. So this has been like the introductory section, and then we want to do one. I'm sorry, this dog is like right up in the excuse you, dog.
He's the star.
He's bumping me. But wanting to, so this was the introduction, and then we want to talk about the nature versus nurture things in the film. I guess we're done with this recording because he's not going to record anymore.
Right.
And then talking about the importance of mental health with adoptees. So please join us for the next 2 installments. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Hi, I'm Whitney.
And I'm Dexter.
And this is Tied Together. So this is part 2 of our media review of 3 Identical Strangers, a documentary about identical triplets that were separated at birth by adoption. So the part 1 was kind of the introduction to the
of the film and kind of our feelings towards some of the topics.
And now we're moving on to something that was a major theme running throughout the documentary, the idea of nature versus nurture.
Yeah. It's so funny because it feels like in the movie it kind of shifts at the beginning when they find each other. It's like, oh, this is all it's all genetics, and this is, I'm just talking about the brothers' perspective. Their whole perspective was like, it's all genetics and we're so much alike without even trying to be, and which is true. Like every bit of that's true. And then like later it talked about they kind of lean more towards nurture, and I'm not sure they conveyed their thoughts on it as clearly as they should have.
Tell me more about that.
It felt like there was a narrative, like the film definitely had a narrative it was trying to push.
Which was
nature's there, nature's there, but nurture can change things. I think was the overall thing that they were trying to say.
Yeah, I felt a little bit like it started. For me personally, this is my personal opinion, I felt like the film kind of started to pander to ideas brought for like adoptive parents, like, oh, like nurture can make all the difference, and a good foundation in the family can really positively affect some of the traumas that some of these kids go through that are adopted and stuff. And I'm not trying to take away from that, but also like adoptees can suffer even if they have like a good household, or if they are well loved, or if they are anything. And I felt like
because there's still a loss there. It doesn't matter how good of a parent you are. It doesn't matter how good the environment is. There's still a loss of that of birth family, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think so. And then I also feel like they tried to downplay the similarities between the triplets and kind of say that it was gimmicky, and I like strongly disagree with that idea. I think that someone can't understand what a biological bond, not having a biological bond all your life and then suddenly having one, I don't think you can understand what that feels like unless you've experienced it yourself. So they're like, oh, like, haha, well, yeah, they all smoke Marlboros and they all like the same type of girl and blah, 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 blah. But is that really what and it's like, those were the things that were brought up out on TV, but I guarantee you that there are some very core fundamental similarities between
ways of thinking, way they process through things.
Yeah, one of them said, like, sometimes I feel like I have an original idea and then I go tell somebody and they're like, oh, your brother told me that not too long ago.
Yeah.
And you can't know what that's like.
Which kind of happens to us a lot.
Yeah.
Like even as dumb as like wanting something, like wanting snacks at night. I mean, like we'll have been eating like a certain snack at night, and then I'll all of a sudden get a craving for something else, and I'll be like, why don't we do this? And you're like, I was just thinking about that like a little bit ago. Like that happens all the time. It's not just that area, but that's like one of the most recent areas that I can think of.
Yeah, or even for me, like I don't know, like even doing this project. Like I have other siblings who I love very much. There's no way any of them would ever do any kind of project with me.
Yeah.
There's no way that we would be able to collaborate the way that you and I do. And that's not a crack. That's just the truth. We're just very different, and have different goals and different, different interests and different everything.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's a certain bond there that I really value.
Yeah.
With you, and just being able to have any kind of remote agreement on what would be important, or even that things are important to bring out. Like, oh, we need to tell people about these are important things. We have like some kind of responsibility to show them to everybody.
Yeah.
Or to show them to the world. People could learn from this, and that's like a fundamental, very core belief that you and I share.
Yeah.
Sometimes we disagree on what those things are, or
how to present it.
Right, but just that very core.
The need to do so is there, and it's the same.
Right.
And a lot of times the approach is the same, even when we don't. Like, there's sometimes where we don't even have to talk about how we want to do something. We'll just, it'll just be understood as like we'll talk about it as like not a formality, but we'll just, like, in order to get the idea out, but like we've already got like the same thought pattern on it, and things will just kind of click together and go from there.
Absolutely. And we're half siblings. We're not triplets or twins. Maybe we are twins. We're not twins. We're like 3.5 years apart. But when we didn't have any shared time together. That was another thing that they talked about, was that those boys had 6 months together before they were adopted. But I don't know, that biological bond is extremely powerful, or it can be.
Yeah.
I have my thoughts on that as an adoptee. Do you have any thoughts on that as someone who's found a family member, or who's you have kind of a different perspective growing up with your biological family?
It's weird. I grew up with my biological brother and my mother, and I love them, and there's similarities there too, but it was weird to get to know you and see how strong the similarities are and how we look at things, and like we don't land in the same place on everything, but even the process by which we get there is the same. We usually, if we look at things differently, we tend to be the inverses of each other, in the sense of like one of us will look at something from a wide view, like a broad stroke type thing, and go narrow, and the other one will go narrow, and then like go on the individual perspective, and then go to the broader implications of it. You know, it's just it's strange.
I think we do that a lot with politics. I think the ways that our politics are different often are like one of us is like, well, think of this in the big scheme, and the other one's like, yeah, but what about the individual person? What about how that affects them? And we'll go back and forth, like on different topics. We'll go. Yeah. One of us will be, what about the individual? What about the everyman? Or, you know, what about the refugee families? Or, you know, like, and we'll go back and forth on those things. And then on the other hand, it's like, well, what about the broad implications of this? It's like, yeah, but how's it going to affect the average American? You know, and we go.
Yeah. But I think we do that a lot, and that's just an area that you can kind of bring that out, where we'll be like, it's weird how we'll be like two sides of the same coin. Anyway, it was weird for me being in a house with my biological sibling, or my half brother on my mom's side, and with my mother, and still feeling like set apart, or not looking at things the exact same way as everybody else. And sometimes you know, not whether intentional or otherwise, being made to feel like my ideas just didn't make sense to anybody. They like kind of look at you like, what do you mean? Like, that doesn't even, and like I'll tell you something and you'll pick it up like like, yeah, absolutely, this is how I'd look at that, and it's, you know, and it's been refreshing to me. And it's also very weird because like in adoption, that makes more like kind of straightforward sense, because you haven't had any kind of biological tie or any kind of like any kind of roadmap to look at, whereas like I've had all that kind of in a sense, but never been able to identify with it as much.
Right. And it's an interesting quandary. I mean, I don't think that growing up without one's biological father is not the same as being adopted.
No.
But there are a lot of parallels. We have a lot of common ground and a lot of common experiences, and that's one of them, feeling set apart. And I think both of us in a lot of ways end up taking after that father's side.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of implications there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we've been able to bond.
Yeah.
Or, find a lot of value in this relationship.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, it's definitely been a huge thing.
Absolutely. What else were we wanting to talk about? Nature versus nurture. Oh, we're at 10 minutes, so we're gonna move on
Part 3.
To part 3. And thank you for tuning in. And if you have any thoughts on these things, please comment, please message us. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Hi, welcome back. I'm Whitney.
And I'm Dexter.
And this is Tied Together. We are on the third part
of our media review
of 3 Identical Strangers. This will be the final installment for this, unless there's interest or something. But yeah, it'll be the final one. No, it's definitely gonna be the final.
For this movie, it's the final.
For this media review, it's the final part 3, final part. Okay, so we left off talking about nature versus nurture.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that topic kind of segues into, in the film, one of the triplets ends up committing suicide. Eddie.
And they kind of take the nurture argument and they kind of take it and pin it all on his dad and say like, well, if he was better this way or that way or whatever, then maybe, it's that same argument where it's all nurture, and nurture has a larger and like, I guess I haven't really laid this out. I think it's both. I think it's always nature and nurture together that make a difference. I don't think you can give equal ground to like one or the other. That's my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's right that they pin it all on the dad and say like, oh, it was just because he did this way, or something like that, because all 3 of them struggled with it. All 3 of them struggled with mental illness and their own difficulties.
Mm-hmm. And they all 3 had a hospitalization as teens. Yeah, they all had an inpatient stay as teenagers. So I thought it was very interesting that in the film they try to like backtrack on that bit. They were almost the same age. They were almost the exact same.
They were all the same age
when that happened in 3 different households, and all 3 of them ended up having an inpatient stay.
The same age, same time.
Mm-hmm. And so at that time they tried to pin it on the birth mom and like, oh, like she had so many mental health issues, and maybe that's why they were selected for the study, which is like a whole nother part of the film. Please watch the film. It's really, really good.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're studying twins or like we're studying pairs and triplets that have mental illness in their family and seeing if we can like change it. And then they're like, oh, I guess we can't really change it. And then later they're like, oh, Eddie committed suicide. Yeah, like it was what was wrong in his environment that made that happen.
Go the other way on it, and it's kind of jarring a little bit, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. And then they try to pin it all on like his parents, and especially his like disciplinarian father, his authoritarian father. And it talks a lot about how Eddie didn't feel like he belonged in his family.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also talks about the trauma of the separation of the triplets from each other, but doesn't talk about the inherent trauma of being adopted.
Yeah.
Which I really had kind of a problem with. It kind of mixes all of these different things together and then
doesn't really explain any of them really well at the end there.
So, and then one thing that really struck me about it was, the triplets, they start a restaurant together, And that was kind of how their relationship unraveled, was going into business together. And then it ends up that Bobby leaves the business and ends up by himself, kind of isolated. And then, but it's not him that ends up committing suicide, it's Eddie. And the reason is, like, what they talk about in the film is that Eddie really wanted everybody to be together and really loved his brothers, and
he was the driving force behind them coming together, starting the restaurant, finding their mother, their birth mother. I think he really got a deep sense of belonging with his brothers, and he just wanted everybody to get along and everybody to be one big happy family. You know, and I think that's everybody's, or that, it was ours anyway, for everybody to just be one big happy family. I think anybody that goes into these kind of reunion situations wants that, everybody to get along for everybody's best interest. But
absolutely, I think you really had your heart set on that. I think you really had high hopes for that.
Yeah.
With us.
Yeah, I think so.
And when it didn't work out that way, but it was hard on us both.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you're good.
So, and then, yeah, so Bobby, he says, in the film, he says, why Eddie and why not me? Everybody loved Eddie. Like, Eddie was everybody's favorite. Like, why him and not me? And it's obvious that he still kind of struggles with that question.
Kind of survivor's guilt, sounds like.
Yeah, in some ways, kind of survivor's guilt. And it makes me wonder if he really was struggling at that time, too. I think that suicidality, especially among adoptees, is really misunderstood. People who are adopted are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than the average adult population, which is a profound number. I know for some like younger age groups, that's like committing suicide is one of the leading causes of death in the United States. That is something that I've struggled with, and I would really like to see it talked about more. I would like to see, I would like people to understand that even the seemingly most well-adjusted adoptees
have deep wounds that come from adoption itself.
Right.
Not that anybody has done. You could be the most spot on, greatest adoptive parent ever. That kid's still going to have inherent trauma from the adoption. And I don't mean to take this from you. I've heard you talk about a lot of these things, and and trauma from the adoption and trauma of not being able to, not like, as great as your parents are, like, they're not a blueprint.
No.
There are some things that are going to be different, and that's its own struggle.
And really giving space for that, letting that be understood. I think a lot of traumas aren't, like, you can't even talk about them. You can't talk about feeling different. You can't talk about, there's no voice to any of it. And so I think that's part of the reason that there's so much struggle. Does that make sense?
Because it's not, anything that's not brought out in the open, all it does is grow in darkness. So when you bring it out in the open, it helps people not feel so alone. And I guess that's kind of the goal here in talking about these things, huh?
Right. Yeah. And so that was why I felt like it was important to bring in, especially in this discussion, because even with Eddie, like, I think probably when it happened, a lot of people were really bewildered that he was so social and so lovable and so full of life, and that he would commit suicide. He was like a young dad when that happened, and had like his whole life ahead of him. Yeah. Really.
The restaurant was just doing well. Bobby wasn't there, but they weren't like on terrible terms as far as I could tell.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure, but like it does, like, on paper, like, I don't think, but that's not what suicide is. Suicide's about feeling, I don't know, for me, suicide's always been about like feeling deeply misunderstood or unheard or alone. And it's more about feeling isolated, feeling it's not a logical, you can something can make no sense whatsoever on paper, but like can lead somebody down that dark path. You know, there's been a lot of difficulties with finding you guys.
Yeah.
Like, it's not been easy. It's been totally life-changing. It's been I've lost a lot. There's been a lot that's been shifted, but in some ways it's the most well I've ever been.
Yeah.
It's the most real I've ever been, and it's the most whole I've ever been. And it's important. And so it's important to understand that those things are valuable, even if the adoptee that you know doesn't decide to search or doesn't decide to go down that path. Like, just there's no easy choices. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you have any closing thoughts? I don't really know how to sum up.
I think the reason we bring this thing, specifically this piece out, is for people to understand that they're not alone in those things, in those struggles, and that people care about you. You know, and you know, if nothing's ever talked about, how can you ever expect to get through it or get any help with it if you just keep it all locked inside? So I think that's kind of what we're saying is, like, you know, it's a scary thing to talk about, but it's necessary. And it may just be the key you need to get through it, is to stare it in the face and to talk about it, and to not feel ashamed or afraid to talk about it.
Right.
So
that's all I think we have for this one.
All right.
Thank you so much for tuning in.
Guys.
Look for more in the future. Bye.